Hi, this is Mike Spinak of Naturography.com, and behind the camera is Joe Decker of RockSlidePhoto.com, and we're bringing you another episode of the Nature Photography Show. Today, we're going to compare and contrast 500 millimeter lens versus 600 millimeter lens. A lot of photographers often, as they develop in their wildlife photography, want to eventually get either of those. And sometimes it's a tough decision. Which one is right for you? Today we'll discuss that and maybe include some things that aren't so clear just from the paper specs. Okay, so to begin with, this is a 500 and this is a 600. So the 600 tends, depending on the brand, to be about 3 or 4 pounds heavier. It also tends to be about $3,000 more expensive. Now, for a lot of people, those factors alone are enough to choose between them. But if they're not, then let's move on. Another consideration, many people would look at this in terms of the optics, which is better optically. Well, I don't really think that that is such a great perspective for choosing between these lenses. The fact is, they're both superb optically. Even if you put the 2-time teleconverters on each of them, they're both so superb optically that it's really an irrelevance in terms of using that to distinguish between them. So another factor is that 600s tend in a number of ways to be rather more inconvenient. To begin with, a 500 will fit into most regular camera packs. For example, a 500 will fit into the low-pro Trekker type packs, whereas the 600 won't. For 600, generally, you need to get a specialized pack like this Kinesis pack. So when you think about the price of getting the lens and the weight of the lens, you're not only thinking of the cost of the lens itself and the weight of the lens itself. Now you also have to think of it in terms of the specialized pack too. And in addition to that, I wouldn't quite say you need a special tripod just for the 600, but most people find that a heavier duty tripod is best for the 600. Another factor is how much it increases the size of the object you're photographing in your picture. Now you might think 100 millimeter difference is not that much. In fact, I think that it is fairly substantial. It's like this. If you were to imagine an object that filled 5 pixels vertically on your frame and 5 pixels horizontally on your frame, for a total of 25 pixels with the 500 millimeter lens, then that would be that would make it so that with the 600 millimeter lens, it would fill 6 pixels vertically by 6 pixels horizontally, which would be 36 pixels. So now when you're factoring in 36 versus 25, you're talking about a 44% difference. 44% increase in terms of the pixel coverage of your subjects in your pictures is fairly substantial. I mean, that's like the difference between using a 12 megapixel sensor and using an over 17 megapixel sensor on your camera. Another factor with the 600 versus 500, 600s are a lot harder to take on planes. In some smaller planes, it won't fit in the overhead compartment and it can't really be carried on in an easy way. So that's also a factor to consider. Another factor is you might not think that the 300, you might not think that the 3 or 4 pound difference is that much, but apparently a lot of people come to consider it a big difference. I can tell you, for example, that I've read Michael Reichman and I think also John Shaw have both made comments how they were selling off their 600s because they were too much of backbreakers for them and they were moving to the 500s. The 600 tends to be chosen for pure reach. And so you need to think about whether you really need that pure reach. The big advantage of that kind of pure reach, well, for one thing, it allows you to get larger in your frame of animals that are hard to get large in your frame. But besides that, even with animals that are easier to get full frame pictures of, it allows you to keep a greater distance, and keeping a greater distance allows you to have the animals be more comfortable and behave more naturally while you're photographing them. So another factor with the 600 versus the 500 is that the 500 is hand-holdable, whereas the 600 is much harder to handhold. Let me show that to you. So this is the 500 millimeter lens, and I'm going to show you that it's fairly easy to handhold. You can handhold it for a fair amount of time without it getting too tiresome or too difficult, and the combination of the size and the weight and the length is reasonably stable enough while you handhold it. For comparison with the 600, this is the 600, and the 600 is quite a bit larger and heavier in terms of holding it and shooting it. I'm having trouble doing it for more than a few seconds. The combination of the weight and the length and the magnification is really pushing the limits of what I can handle for very long. Final considerations between the 500 and the 600 should be subject and location. Your subject and location can be very relevant. To give you an example, suppose you're a bird photographer primarily. Let's suppose that you live on the East Coast and you're going to be shooting mainly on the East Coast. Well, on the East Coast, where you have a much greater population density than on the West Coast, you're going to find that the birds are much more used to people, and they tend to allow you to get a lot closer, and they tend to be a lot more comfortable. And so because of that, you would probably be fine with a 500 millimeter lens for most of your birding photography on the East Coast, whereas if you were doing the same type of birding photography on the West Coast, you would want to use a 600 millimeter lens. So again, subject and location can be a relevant final consideration here. Well, I hope that you found this useful, and I hope that you choose to take a workshop with us, and you can go to our websites. My website is naturography.com. Joe's website is rockslightphoto.com. Give us a call, check out our websites. We hope to see you soon.